Hey everybody, and welcome back to Garage Band Guitarist. I'm going to do a series of three little lessons here that aren't really lessons. They aren't really guitar lessons. They're what I'm going to call optional. I'm going to label them as optional because you may or may not need to review this material depending on your background and what you have done previously with guitar or what you might already own in terms of a guitar. But I wanted to do three things, which are basically the first one, this one, will be about equipment, about a guitar, if you don't have one yet, what you might want to look for, and then some ancillary things, additional equipment, stuff that you might want to have in order to help you get a good start. And I'm going to break that down into sort of essential things, important things that'll be very helpful, but you don't have to have them. And then things that are really optional, but they might prove to be useful to you. So that's what this one's going to be about. Then we're going to do two other ones. One will be about some basic music notation and theory. Not really, we're not going to get into theory, but how we name notes and just some basic vocabulary that you're going to have in order to understand what I'm talking about when we're going through the lessons. And then the last thing, the third one, will be sort of getting to know your guitar and how to hold it, how to hold the pick, tuning the guitar, things like that. And so you may or may not really need to spend a lot of time with these three lessons. So I will call them optional, and then we'll get to the first real lesson after we go through these three things, okay? So hopefully it'd be pretty straightforward for you. This isn't any heavy duty stuff we're going to talk about in these lessons, but I want you to head in with the right stuff and some basic knowledge that'll help you grapple with the rest of the stuff in a much easier way. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time talking about those things. Okay, so let's do the equipment one. That's what this one is going to be about. And what I want you to be able to do is to start up with a decent set of equipment that's not going to get in your way. Okay, and what I'm going for here is the minimums that you need in order to actually make this thing work, and so that your guitar and your equipment is not getting in the way of you making progress. So it's kind of the basic equipment, the minimum that you need, and the idea is for you to spend as little money as possible in order to get yourself into a good spot here. So minimal amount of money. You may even have some of this stuff. But let me explain what it is and why you might want to grab a couple of additional things in addition to your guitar. Okay, so let me start with the guitar though. Let me start with the guitar. Now you may already have a guitar. You may have borrowed one from a friend, or you may have an old one that's been sitting around, somebody else in your family was playing or something and kind of gave up on. So you might have one, and that's fine, that's great. Go ahead and use that guitar. There's no need to buy a new guitar necessarily in order to take these lessons, okay? Now, there is one thing that you might want to worry about if you've got a guitar already, and is it set up well enough that it's not going to get in your way as you're learning to play. And it doesn't need to be some big professional setup, but there's a couple of things that you'll want to worry about just a little bit if you've got a used guitar. And that's basically how the guitar is set up, and that has to do with how the strings and the bridge and the various pieces of the guitar here are aligned, okay? And what you really want is you want your strings to be reasonably close to the fretboard, so you don't have to push them down too far, right? That's the main issue that you might worry about if you've got a used guitar. Now, if you're worried about this and having the guitar set up properly, one thing you can do is just take it to a guitar store, and the guitar tech can set it up for you. Now that costs a little bit of money. Just tell them you're a new player and you want the guitar to be set up properly, and they'll take care of it for you. But you don't necessarily have to do that if the strings aren't too far off of the fretboard or too low. Those are two things that could happen. If they're too high, you have to push them down too far. And that's hard, especially when you're learning. You haven't built up that muscle yet to get your strings down onto the frets so they make the appropriate sound. So if they're too far off, it's not only going to be hard to do that, but it's going to stretch the strings while you're doing it. It's going to pull them out of tune, okay? Most guitars, it won't be a problem. It'll be close enough that you don't have to worry about it. But if you take a look at your guitar and just look down here about where the body meets the neck, right around in there, and you look at how much room there is between the string and the fretboard, okay, it ought to be around 1/8 of an inch, okay, just to give you something. You can see on my guitar, this guitar is set up properly. You can see that there's a little bit of space there, but not a lot. But if you just take something to measure, just look like, make sure it's about 1/8 of an inch from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string, okay? If it's about 1/8 of an inch, you're good, okay, on that low string, just to have them all about the same. If it's lower than that, you might get this kind of string buzz where the string is bumping into the next fret that you don't want it to, okay? And so you don't want that. So that might mean the frets, the strings are too low. That's a challenging thing to adjust on an acoustic guitar. So you want to take it in if they're too low. If they're really too high, same thing. You'll probably have to take it in and have someone else fix it for you. It's something that normal people can do, but it's more than we can cover in this course and how to correct that. So if it's too high or too low, you're getting that buzz, or it's too hard to push them down. They're more than an eighth or 3/16 or whatever of an inch away from the fretboard. You should probably take it in and have someone correct it for you. If you buy a new guitar, it should already be in that state, okay? So you won't have to worry about it. But it can change over time with temperature and the use of the guitar and how heavy the strings are and stuff. And so you might need to take it in if it's too far off, okay? So that's the one thing you probably need to worry about in terms of whether the guitar is set up properly or not. You can use an acoustic or an electric guitar for this course, but I would highly recommend an acoustic guitar. An acoustic guitar is one like this that's got a thicker body and it's got a hole in it somewhere where the sound bounces around inside and comes out the hole and produces a nice full sound, okay? Usually the hole is right there in the middle where the strings are, but sometimes they'll have it up here or somewhere else, okay? They have a series of little holes that do the same thing, okay? But that's an acoustic guitar, and that's what we want in this course for the most part. Now, I don't want you to have to buy a new guitar, and so you can do it with an electric guitar. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But then you get into other issues, okay? Like you've got to have a patch cord, and you've got to have an amplifier, so you can hear the guitar properly. If you try to practice an electric guitar without plugging it into an amplifier, you can't hear it well enough to really know what you're doing. And so it's easier to just have an acoustic guitar, and you can just pick it up and play. You don't have to fiddle with, getting your amp plugged in and getting your guitar connected to the amp and fiddling with the settings and all that. You don't just pick it up and start playing. And the kind of music that we're going to do in this course really lends itself well to being played and practiced on an acoustic guitar. Further down the road, you might want to get an electric guitar. That's perfectly fine, and you can very easily transition things over from what we've learned here to playing on an electric guitar. So that's fine if that's what your ultimate aim is to play electric guitar. You'll get there the same way using an acoustic guitar, but it'll just be easier when you're learning and you're starting off and practicing to use an acoustic guitar like this, okay? So, one that sounds like that when you're playing it, instead of, an electric, you wouldn't be able to hear all that. It would just sound like you wouldn't be able to really hear what's going on, okay? All right, so that's one thing, is to try to get an acoustic guitar would be helpful. The second thing is, if you're going to buy a guitar, there's a lot of different kinds of guitars out there. Oh my goodness, and there's a whole industry of trying to get you to buy multiple guitars with different purposes and things. But what you want, I think, when you're starting off, is a regular six-string guitar that that is a steel string guitar. That's what they're called. Okay, there's an alternative to the steel string guitar, which is a nylon string guitar, and some people recommend for beginners nylon string guitars instead of steel string guitars. Okay, I have one here, which I'll just grab real quick and show you the difference. This is a classical guitar actually, and this is a nylon string, and the strings sound kind of different. I played that one for you. This is a nylon string. It's not a lot different, but it's kind of a rounder sound. This kind of guitar is used a lot more for when people are playing fingerstyle, when they're picking with their fingers like this. And that's the classical style, of course, and so people use nylon strings for that. Why would people recommend nylon strings for a beginner? Well, the reason is the strings, first of all. The nylon strings are kind of fatter, they're kind of thicker, okay? And so the steel string ones are very skinny, and they feel like they're pressing in to your fingertips more. You know, it hurts a little bit, actually. Same thing with nylon ones, but it's not quite as bad because they're rounder. The circumference of the string is fatter, and so it's a little bit more comfortable to you when you're starting off and you haven't built up that toughness in your fingertips yet. Okay. The other reason people might recommend a nylon string is that the width of the fretboard going across this way, across here like this, is wider. It's a fatter neck in terms of going across, and that means there's a little bit more distance between each of the strings. And when you're starting off playing, that can be a little bit easier as you're trying to get used to getting your fingers into the right spot and not bumping the string that's next to it, right? And stopping that one from playing. You know, you don't want that to happen. You want that to happen, not like that. And so people can recommend that because that might be a little bit easier as you're learning these initial chord forms. Okay. Well, okay, that's good, and those are perfectly valid points. But there's something to be said for the steel string too, and there's kind of versions of the same thing. One is that, you know, hey, yeah, it's going to hurt a little, you know, and you're going to have to get used to it. But might as well just get toughened up, you know. I mean, that's kind of my attitude toward it, because it doesn't take that long. And, you know, if you play with a steel string guitar just for a few weeks, you know, you'll get little calluses on the ends of your fingers. They'll toughen up and it won't hurt as much. And you won't really, at that point, be able to tell the difference between the nylon string and the steel string, you know. So you know, there's a small advantage there, but it's not a big deal. The second thing is that width of the fretboard. Well, that has advantages in some ways, and it also has disadvantages because the neck is bigger on these kinds of guitars, and that can be more difficult for people, particularly if you have smaller hands. And especially when you're just starting off learning, it's easier to get your hand around the guitar and get it in the right position if the neck is skinnier, right? And so that's an advantage of the steel string guitar, is that it's got that smaller neck. So, you know, everything comes with pluses and minuses in life, and that's part of the difference here with these and why the steel string. The last reason for the steel string that I think dominates is that that's what most people use, and the kind of music that you're used to hearing and the sound that you want to get out of the guitar comes from the steel string guitar. And the kind of playing that we're going to be doing with the strumming is almost always done, not almost always, but the vast majority of the time is done with a steel string guitar. And the people that you see playing in music videos and all this kind of music that we're going to play in this course are using steel string guitars almost always. And so I would recommend that you just go ahead and, you know, bite the bullet and deal with it. You know, you'll get some good out of it, and you'll have some additional challenges in terms of the toughness of your finger, but you'll get over it pretty quick. And so I think the steel string is a better way to go. Okay, there's other things that are different between the two kinds of guitars, but those are the main ones and why I would push you toward a steel string guitar. Okay, one other thing when you're picking out a guitar that's important is the size of the body, this part down here. Okay, and they range a lot, okay, because there's really small ones and there's really big ones, and these have different names, and you'll see them when you're looking at guitars, it'll say it's a dreadnought or it's a concert or whatever, and that's referring to the size of the body. And the thing with the body sizes is that the bigger ones sound fuller and deeper and richer the bigger they get. And so that's an advantage of going bigger, but they get harder to hold, right? Okay, this isn't even a big one at all. I mean, it's good. It's a good size for me. I'm kind of a normal, average size person. Okay, I'm like 5'8", and my hands are kind of an average size for someone my height and so on. So this kind of, and where my arm falls, it makes this kind of guitar very comfortable for me. This is what's called a concert style guitar. There's bigger ones. One that's the next kind of size up typically is called a dreadnought. Those are the ones you'll see the most, a concert size and a dreadnought. And I actually don't even have a regular full dreadnought guitar, but this one kind of looks like a dreadnought, so I pulled it out just to show you. And the thing with the dreadnought you'll notice is that the bottom part here is a lot bigger than the top part here. This part's skinnier, this part is bigger, okay? And so that's what the dreadnoughts kind of look like. And they're just bigger, and they, so if this was a real dreadnought, the body would be up further, sitting on my leg, and my arm would be up higher, like this, right? And that's fine, and some people like that, and they find that quite comfortable. And so dreadnought is a very popular size of guitar. You see them all the time, people playing them. There's an even bigger one called jumbo, and there's all kinds of things in between these two. In fact, that one I just showed you is kind of in between a concert and a dreadnought, actually. But I would recommend for most people probably a concert size would be a good place to start. There's smaller ones too. They call them parlor guitars, and then there's like 3/4 size guitars and things like that. There's all different kinds of ways of labeling these things. And this one's a smaller one. This is a close to a parlor size. It's not quite all the way down to a parlor, but this is a parlor size guitar. It's shorter and the body is smaller, and the sound is different. It's not as full. Probably hear that difference, even though for a small body guitar, this one's got a pretty nice sound, I will say. But it's just not as full and deep of a sound when you have these smaller bodies. But the win with these small ones, they're just so handy. It's so easy to pick up and leave them laying around, pick them up and play. They're very inviting to play these smaller ones, and so I love this one. I play it quite a bit. But that's kind of a decision for you to make. But if you don't know, and you're not a real tall person, you might want to go with the concert size guitar, okay? The other thing you might have noticed when I held up this one guitar is that it has what's called a cutout. When we had this guitar, these other guitars, they're the same on both sides, this part and this part. See, it's symmetrical. But this guitar I'm going to show you has this part is missing, okay? And there's a reason for that. There we go. So this one has that part cut out. So instead of it being like that, that part is missing. The reason for that is so that when you're playing up on these high frets, it's easier to get to them, right? And so if it went only here, my hand would kind of get stuck right there. I couldn't get further than that, and it would be really hard. I'd have to stretch over to get to these upper frets like that. But this just allows me to go right up and play up here. You're not going to have to do that in this course. We're not going to be doing that kind of playing. So you don't have to worry about it. But, if you're buying a guitar, something to think about, down the road, it might make things easier for you. A lot of guitar playing, tons of guitar playing doesn't require that. And I would say, you see a lot of both kinds, but it's probably the most popular to have both of the sides the same on the guitar. Okay. The other thing is, you may have also noticed there's a difference in the headstock up here between different guitars, and you'll see this all the time. And it's are there 3 of the strings hooked in on each side, like this one, or are they all on one side and they're in line like this one is. Okay, so now all 6 are on one side and they're all in line. There's pluses and minuses to that too, but I will just say for the purposes of this course, it doesn't really matter. Okay, you're just not going to be in a situation with this kind of playing that's where this is going to make a big difference to you. Okay, even professional players, they have both kinds, and you know there's different reasons why they might have one for something and another one for something else, but you know, you don't have to worry about that. But just in case you noticed that and were wondering about it, I did want to mention that it's something not to worry about. Okay, now you can get a guitar that's a beginner acoustic guitar like one of these that's going to do all the tricks that you need for $200 to $300. Okay, and when I say beginner, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, because I mean what you can get for $200 or $300 these days compared to 20 or 30 years ago, it's amazing. I mean, the production methods for these guitars has improved so much that you can get something for $200 or $300 that would have cost you $1,000 or more, you know, 20 years ago, in terms of the basic quality of the guitar. So, you know, something in that range, $200 to $300 is going to suit you just fine, and probably you keep using it for the rest of your life. I got one over here I picked up at a pawn shop for $130. I've used it a lot, and I played gigs with it and everything. And so you don't need to spend a lot of money on a guitar to get started. If you want to just give yourself a little bit of insurance, get an acoustic guitar like this, $200 to $300 from a name brand guitar company. What do I mean by that? Well, let me just give you 3 that I think make really good beginner guitars. Fender, Epiphone, E-P-I phone, Epiphone, and then Ibanez. They all have really nice beginner guitars in that $200 to $300 range, and you know you can get a really nice guitar that will do you all kinds of service throughout your life. Okay. The last thing about a guitar that you might buy is that a lot of them in that price range will come with some electronics built into the guitar, and that is super helpful. So I would suggest to you that if you can, get one with the electronics in it. You can get them without the electronics and you save $25, $50 or something, but if you get them with the electronics in it, it'll be really helpful for you. And the way it's typically set up, there's a little panel on the side of the guitar, something like this one, and it's called a preamp, preamplification, preamp. And what happens is this is what you'll use to actually plug the guitar into an amp later on when you're ready to play it through, and you need it to be louder in a different kind of environment or something. And you just plug a cord in to the guitar somewhere. This is where you hook up your strap on the end, this strap button here, but there's a hole in it, if you see that, and you can just stick the cord right in there and plug it into an amp, and it'll amplify your guitar. That's why those electronics are there. And they typically have some kind of volume control and then a couple of tone controls. This one's got 3, they're little sliders that go up and down. There's low, mid, high, and volume there. There's other ones that maybe they'll only have 2 tone controls or something like that. Let's see, here's one. This one's got knobs that you turn instead of sliders, but it's got a volume and it's got a bass and a treble. Okay, so, and this one, instead of having the plug-in in the strap button, it's actually a little separate panel right here. They all require some sort of battery to power that preamp, and it's usually almost always a 9-volt battery, and there's somewhere on the guitar. This one, it's down here. You just pop the thing out and put the battery in there, and sometimes the little panel itself on this one, the panel itself pops out, and you stick the battery in underneath there. So it's very straightforward, and you can figure that out without help from me. But that opens up, and then the battery goes underneath there. Okay. All right. The other thing that is great about these electronic setups is that a lot of them, probably most of them, come with a tuner in them too. And man, is it handy to be able to tune your guitar. You just push a button on here, you hit a string, and it tells you whether it's too low or too high, and you tighten it up to make it higher or loosen it to make it lower, and just bam, 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 and you've got your guitar in tune, and then you turn the tuner back off and play. It's absolutely super convenient, and so if you can get one that's got a tuner in it, do it. That would be my advice. It's super handy, and we're going to talk about how to tune the guitar using a tuner that's in a guitar, and also the kind that you clip onto your guitar in the next 2 more lessons from now. When we're talking about getting to know your guitar, we're going to talk through how to tune. Okay, but that's a nice feature to have in the guitar if you can afford to have that one. Most of these, like I said, it'll just automatically come with that in it nowadays. So you'll see all different kinds of brands of these, but Fishman is the one you see the most. It's a very reliable Fishman electronics in lots of guitars. They put them in all different brands of guitars too. I have Fenders, Ibanez, Epiphone guitars that all have Fishman electronics in it. So it's a very popular brand for this particular purpose. Okay, all right, and so that's basically it in terms of buying a guitar, and I hope that will be helpful to you if you still need to do that. Okay. The last thing I'll say, and it's going to transition us into the stuff. The last thing I'll say about buying, you may be wondering, should I buy a case? A lot of guitars that are sold online and elsewhere come without a case, and you're thinking, well, I better get one because I need to protect the guitar, or I need to drag it around somewhere. Maybe. I think when you're learning, it's mostly sitting around home, and you can transport the guitar over to your buddies or something without putting it in a case, and so you don't necessarily need to buy a case. It can be convenient when the time comes when you do need to drag it around. So, okay, get a case maybe. But the thing I will say about the case is I almost want to recommend against it on purpose, because it encourages you to put the guitar away. And that's not what you want to do. You want to have that thing out. And so it just encourages you to grab it and to play it, And so if you're always putting it away and putting it in the case and then putting it in the closet to keep out of the way, it's out of the way, it's out of sight, out of mind. You can't just, grab it and start strumming, And so I really discourage people, if you get a case when you're starting off, don't use it. Put it away and leave the guitar out without the case. It'll encourage you to pick it up and noodle around and practice some little thing you've been working on. Even if you're, just watching TV or something, just, pick up the guitar and, you're watching the news and the person's yanking away. You can practice your chord forms almost mindlessly because there's so much repetition when you're learning. And it'll encourage you if it's out. If it's in the case and you got to get up and go to the closet and pull it out and take it out of the case, it's not a huge deal, but it's enough to discourage you. And you'll do better if the guitar is out. So think about that case. If it's not there, it ain't going to get in the way. Okay. All right. Okay. Now that's the first stuff thing that might go with the guitar is the case. But let me turn to some other things. And you'll see all kinds of stuff that you can buy for your guitar. And it's fun, and, there's all kinds of, amplifier things and gadgets. And, it just goes on, different things you can buy to do different things with your guitar playing. And, I'm sure most and all of them have value in some circumstances and so on. But what I want to do is, again, I'm trying to get you to the minimum that's necessary to get going on this course and become a guitar player without a lot of hassle and a lot of expense. So there's two things I think are essential though, and so I'm going to talk about those real quick. The first one is the tuner, and I already talked about that because of it being part of the guitar. You want to have some kind of tuner. If you don't have one built into your car, you want to get a tuner. You can tune by ear, and we're going to talk about that in a subsequent lesson. But when you're starting off, especially if you don't have a lot of musical experience, that can be very frustrating, and your ears just aren't trained up enough in order to do it super accurately. And so it's much easier to have an electronic tuner, and it's much more accurate. I mean, it's easier and it's more accurate. People who play professionally still use electronic tuners all the time, particularly when you're playing somewhere there's a lot of noise in the environment. It's hard to hear as well as you need to get the guitar in tune, and electronic tuner does it without you having to hear anything. And so it's really important in lots of different ways to have an electronic tuner. I still use electronic tuner all the time, and it's just easier and more accurate. Okay, there's lots of different kinds of tuners out there as well, but I think the most popular thing, besides the ones that are in the guitar, are ones that you clip on the end of your guitar. And so this is one. You can see the little clip there, and then it's got a panel, a display panel of some kind. This is another one. It's got the clip, and then it's got the little display panel here. And you just put these on the end of your guitar. You just clip them on right there on the top on the headstock. And this one, same thing. And they have these little panels that you can move around so you can see them well while you're doing it. All right. And I'm not going to do it right now, but you turn them on, and then it just, you play a string, and it tells you whether it's too high or too low, and you adjust it till it's in the right place. Very, very handy, cheap, $15 probably. You can get one. You can get more expensive ones that cost $40, $50, $100, but you can get one that'll work perfectly well for about $15. And so get one. You will move through these things a lot quicker, and you'll have to spend less time prepping to get ready to play if you have a tuner, electronic tuner, and just bam, 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 you're ready to go. Okay, very, very, very important to have that. The other essential item is the pick, and that, there's different ways of playing guitar that don't require a pick. People use their fingernails, people use their nails. There's different kinds of picks, and there's different things, ways of playing the guitar. But we're focusing on guitar playing that you play with a guitar pick, and I'm going to show you a few different picks here, so you get a sense of. I'm about to lose my pile here. Here we go. All right, and so this is a very typical guitar pick, and many guitar picks are shaped like that. Okay, whoops, there it goes. All right, so that's the guitar pick. You will see, and you will be able to access guitar picks of different shapes and different sizes and different thicknesses, different texture, all kinds of picks out there. But I would suggest that you start off with something that's very much like this pick, and you'll see these everywhere. This is a medium pick. It's called a medium pick. It's a very standard shape and thickness. The Fender medium pick is probably the most popular pick in the world. It looks like this. It looks like the one I just had, except it'll say Fender medium. Now this is a heavy, okay? So, but the one you want probably to start with is a medium. It'll say Fender medium. I don't have any Fender mediums here. I have a bunch of other medium picks, but I have a Fender medium. But there's this is a Ernie Ball medium. There's all kinds of other ones. Dunlop makes a lot of picks. Okay, but that Fender medium is so popular. It's a very smooth pick too, and it slides over the strings well. It's great when you're starting off to have a pick like that. It'll do you just fine for many things that you want to play from now and forever. I use medium picks most of my life. You can get much thinner ones, and you can get much thicker ones. And I have gone to a thicker pick in my playing over time, but you can get ones that are super thin that are just they're so easy to bend. You know, they're like paper thin. This one's not even the thinnest. This isn't my pick. My friend left this here. I don't use this kind of pick anymore, but I used to, and I used to use even thinner ones. But I will say that, you know, you don't get as full of a sound with a thin pick. It just doesn't dig into the strings as well. And later on, when you're trying to increase your speed, these picks become more of a problem because when they bend, you end up moving the top part of the pick where you're holding on. You end up moving it a lot more to get it over the string because it's bending. You're starting here, and then finally it pops over the string, and you've moved the pick a lot when you do that, and that impedes your ability to move it quickly. And that's why thicker picks, actually, if you go and look at players who are super fast, they use these thick picks. And so this is one, and you can see, it's hard to see probably on here, but it's a very thick pick, but it's got kind of a beveled tip to it, so it still slides over the strings fine. And these thick picks encourage you to hold the pick more loosely, and that's something that can be a challenging problem. When I was first playing, I held my pick too tight, okay, and that's why I wanted those floppy picks, because I was holding on to it so tight. You don't want to do that. You got to relax your hand as much as you can when you're playing. And these, it seems almost contradictory, but these thicker picks actually encourage you to hold it loosely because you got to in order to get it over the strings. And we'll talk a little bit about that in 2 more lessons too. And we're talking about getting to know your guitar. Okay. So, you know, if you, barring anything else, just get a medium pick, you'll be fine. Okay. You'll see there's all kinds of crazy things out there. Some of them have a texture on them that help you hold on to it better. That's what this one does. Some of them, you know, there's different shapes. There's like a triangular shape. This one's triangular, and it's even got a hole in the middle. and there's this texturing on it to help you hold on to it. Again, this is my friend's pick. I wouldn't play with a pick like that, but he does, and there it is. So, but there's a bunch of, you know, there's endless variety. People are very inventive coming up with these things. But a regular medium pick will do you just fine when you are starting out. Okay? All right. So that's the end of the essentials. So you got your guitar, you got your tuner, and you got your pick, and you're going to be good. You don't have to go any further than that in order to play your guitar, get through this course, and really, you know, make a lot of progress on playing guitar. Just those 3 things, okay? Now, there's a few things that are important in addition to the essential. You can get by without them, but probably things will go better if you have these things. And the first one is just strings. So just to talk quickly about strings. When you buy a new guitar, a lot of times they just put really cheap, crappy strings on the guitar. And so you want to replace them with something that's a little bit better. Also, if you're using someone else's guitar or an old guitar, you're borrowing one or something, and it's been sitting around for a long time or it's been played to death, those strings probably need to be replaced, and the guitar just won't sound as good if they've been on there for a really long period of time. If you see any discoloration or corrosion on the strings or something, they're beyond usable life, okay, and you need to replace them. And we'll have a video that shows how to change strings a little bit further on, but if you need to do that, you can skip ahead and learn how to change the strings. But I would suggest maybe that you replace them if they're old or if you've got a totally brand new guitar. Now, sometimes if you buy a guitar from a guitar store, like a local in-person store, or a couple of online places, they'll do that for you. They'll put new strings on for you and set up the guitar. If you buy from some other kinds of places or you buy a used guitar, they won't, or they usually won't do that. And you're just buying one from somebody or borrowing one. Now, if you go online, there's a couple companies I would recommend in order to buy a guitar and to buy all this ancillary equipment. One is Sweetwater, and they just do a fantastic job. It's a full service operation. You'll get into a relationship with a advisor there who will possibly even drive you a little crazy with the amount of follow-up and contact. They want to make sure you're happy. But they do work on the guitar before they send it to you to make sure it's set up properly. They'll, in most cases, they'll replace the strings and put better ones on. Excuse me. And, you know, it's just a totally pro operation all the way around. You know, you pay a little more for that, though, okay? An alternative is a place like Musician's Friend, and I buy a lot of stuff from Musician's Friend. It's a little cheaper than Sweetwater, but they don't do as much in terms of fiddling with the equipment and stuff before they send it to you, okay? It's more sort of drop ship to you, and then I have never had any problem with anything that I've bought from Musician's Friend, and their customer service has been fine. If I needed to return something, it's been great. I have no complaints about that. But that's part of Sweetwater's deal is, you know, it costs a slight bit more, but you get more attention, both in terms of the equipment that you get and in terms of follow-up and customer service. So, and they throw a handful of candy in your package too. So that's Sweetwater versus a Musician's Friend, which is just, you know, sending you the stuff. Okay, both of them have worked very well for me. I've used them both over time, and there's other ones out there too. Those are just examples where I think you can count on getting a good shake. Okay. But the strings, so back to the strings. So you, if you're going to replace the strings, the main issue that you're going to have to confront is how thick or how heavy the strings should be. Let me grab this packet here I dropped. There we go. This is a set of acoustic strings, and you can buy acoustic strings just anywhere from one of these online places. There's lots of brands that make perfectly good strings, GHS and Ernie Ball, and you know some of the famous string makers. I got this from a generic. Well, it's not. They sell all kinds of strings, but it's called JustStrings.com. But they have their own sort of in-house brand of strings, which I like. I think they sound great. So they're a little cheaper than the name brands, but I use those other brands too. You know, there's not that much different. They go on sale. I'll grab a bunch of them or something. But these are the strings. They come in a pack like this. There's 6 strings in there, and they're named by how thick the strings are. So you'll hear people talking about their guitar strings and like, you know, hey, what do you got on there? Some 10s or what do you 12s, 11s? You know, and that number refers to the gauge of the string. In particular, it refers to the gauge, how thick the skinniest and the highest string is. So if they say 10s, they mean that string is 0.010 of an inch. That's what the 10 is. That's the 10 is 0.010. If they say 11s, it's 0.011. Okay, so it's a little bit thicker. And those differences seem small, but they make a difference in how the strings sound and behave. And so you have to attend to that when you're purchasing strings. The thicker the strings are, so like a 12 or a 13, if somebody says that, those are getting pretty thick. And the thing with those is the thicker the strings are, in my view, the better they sound. They have a fuller sound. They're not as tinny, yeah? But they're harder to push down, okay, because they're thicker and they're tougher, right? And you're stretching something thicker over the same distance. You got to tighten it up more in order to get to the same note. So when you push it down, you're pushing down something that's tighter and tougher to push. So that's what happens. That's the trade-off with these. Tinnier sound versus an easier to push down versus better sound, but they're harder to push down. When you're starting off, it's more important to be able to push them down. You want to be able to make the chords and get things out. And, you know, I think further down the road, you might think about going to a thicker string, but I recommend to you that you use 10s when you're starting off, okay? You can get them thinner, you can get 9s, you can even get 8s, but they don't sound very good, particularly on an acoustic guitar where the sound needs to project acoustically instead of being picked up by a pickup on electric guitar. Electric guitars typically use thinner strings, but on an acoustic guitar, you want them to be a little thicker. A lot of times when they ship, they put 11s on them and sometimes even 12s. I just think those are too hard for beginners when you're trying to, you know, you haven't built up the muscles in your fingers yet, and you're trying to push these strings down and contort your hand in ways that you have never had to do before, it's easier if they're thinner. Okay, so I recommend a 10 to get them started. So this one is a 10. It goes from 0.010. That's the thinnest string, and it gets gradually bigger. The next string is the 0.014, and then the thickest one down here is 0.046. Okay, so it's a lot thicker than the skinny one. But then, if you got 11s, those numbers would be even bigger, right? Okay, so I recommend a 10 to get you started. I think that'll work well. It's a good compromise, I think, between the sound and the ability to push them down. And then, there's lots of different kinds of acoustic strings out there. I think if you get something that's got the word bronze in the strings, there's phosphor bronze and bright bronze and just bronze. Those have a nice mellowy kind of sound. Bright enough, but they're not sort of tinny. And I think that works well for acoustic guitar. But it won't really matter. Any kind of acoustic guitar string you get with that are 10s or 11s will be just absolutely fine for what we're going to do. So don't worry about it. But if you see the bronze, maybe go for that. You might like it. And then the other thing that I consider to be important besides strings is a guitar stand. Why is that so important? Just leave your guitar in the case. No. You could have your guitars leaning up against the couch or whatever. Fine, yeah, that's good too. The side of your desk, no problem. It's not as secure that way, and you don't want to knock it over. I had a guitar that I had leaned up against the table once, and it fell over, and this hit the ground, and it snapped the neck right there. And I just had bought the guitar within a couple of weeks before that. It's so infuriating. So you don't want your guitar to fall over. And a stand helps with that. And it also, the main thing, and I'm back to the argument I was making about the case, it helps you leave the guitar out. And so if it's just set up your stand somewhere near where you are a lot, your couch, your TV, your desk, if you work at home or something, the guitar, if it's right there, you'll pick it up and you'll exercise your fingers and you'll play things that you're working on. If it's there, it's present, it works, and the stand helps with that. There's tons of different kinds of stands out there. Again, there's all kinds, but I'm just recommending something like this. It's small, it's compact. Just get a sense it's shorter than the neck here, okay, of the guitar. And, you just unfold it. These little things pop down, and then you spread the legs out like that, and there's the guitar stand, and the guitar just goes in there. You sit this on the ground, and then the bottom of the guitar goes in these little hooks down here, and it leans up against the back like that. And that's perfectly stable, and you just, it's out of the way. It's not a big deal. It's a small thing, and it's there, and it makes you practice. So I really highly recommend that you get a stand, okay? In fact, people that I have taught guitar in the past, my friends and family, when they start up, I bought them a stand because I thought it was so important that they had it sitting there when they're learning, first time learning, because it's there, okay? Makes you pick it up. All right, and then so that's it for the important stuff, and then some optional things. I would say, and you can or not get these things, but they could be a little helpful, and they probably will be further down the road. But you don't need to worry about them right now. If you want to, yes, go ahead. But the first one is a strap. Okay, and straps are very straightforward with guitars. Most guitars have strap buttons on them like this, right? There's one here, and there's one down on the bottom, okay? And you just, you have a strap, and you just, clip it over the strap button. No big deal. I mean, I don't even need to explain that to you, right? But I did want to say two things about straps, because you can kind of go in the wrong direction on them. One is that when you get one, don't get a super cheap one, okay? Make sure that this part at the end that's going to hook over the button, over the strap button, has got some thickness to it. It's got some heft, that's tough. Okay, if it's too wimpy and loose, it'll fall off, you know, and you don't want to drop your guitar, and so you want it to be thick enough to really hold on to that strap button. It should be a little bit difficult to put on. You should have to put some pressure to put it on. Okay, and so make sure you don't get one that's just too floppy and can fall off the guitar. It'll be a pain, and you could end up damaging your guitar. Even better is a lot of straps now have what are called strap locks built into them. And so this is an example of one. And so this goes over the strap button, and then it slides up in there like that. So it's slid over, and then it's slid up in there. And then there's a little trigger of some kind that closes up around that strap button. See how that closed up? Yeah. And so that prevents the thing from coming off at all. So if I put this on the guitar, slide it over the strap button there. See how I did that? And then I close this thing up around it, and now I can't get it off. Right? It's stuck on there. Right? And so no matter how much I jump around or walk around or not paying attention when I'm talking to somebody, this will not fall off. And I do that on both ends, and the thing's on me, and it's there. Right? It's not going to fall off. And that is really helpful, and it prevents damage to your guitar. Okay, that's the main thing. And then you just slide it back off. No big deal. Okay, so that's a great thing to have. It doesn't cost that much to get a strap with a strap lock on it these days. Okay, all right, and then just two more things and we're done. One is a string winder. Again, this is not essential. You can get by without a string winder, but when you're changing the strings, and we're going to get to that later, you have to turn these things a lot, you know, because you're starting from zero, and you got to spin. You know, you got to have the string go around there a few times, and there's a lot of turns per string wind. Okay, and that can get sort of laborious, and so if you have a string winder, this thing just goes over the end, and it just makes the whole thing a lot faster. So you can just woo woo woo, and it just goes around and around real quick. Okay, so this is a traditional string winder style. However, I will suggest an upgrade to this, which is this little tool. This is a little tool that has the string winder built into it. So this part down on the end here, that's a string winder. Okay, so I do the same thing with it to spin my tuning pegs more quickly. But you see it folds in half here, and so there's more to it. So there's that piece, string winder, but then there's also on the other end, all the way on the other end, there's this little U-shaped tool here, and that is used to help you pull these little pegs out of the bottom of the guitar. When you're going to change the strings, you got to pop these out, and so that little U shape just goes underneath the peg, and it helps you pry it up without damaging the guitar. You can pull them out with pliers and different things too, but having something like this just makes it easier, and it prevents you from damaging the peg or the guitar. So that's nice to have. And then in the middle, there's a little clipper. You see that? That's just like a little string clipper right there. There's a little hole in there. You slide over the string and clip the string off. And when you're taking the guitar strings off to change the strings, you loosen them up, and then you just cut the string in half. It makes it quicker getting them off. And then when you're done, you'll have extra string hanging off up here. You don't want that flopping around and stabbing you. So you just clip that off. You can clip it off with pliers or with another kind of wire cutter or something. But hey, why not have it here on your little tool too? Makes things super handy. And so I would suggest getting this kind of string winder so you have all three of those parts together. Super handy. Okay. And then the last thing is a capo. Oh, capos. Capos can be a little controversial in the guitar world. I would urge you to ignore that controversy. Capos are a little item like this that basically, this is the end of your guitar. The strings don't vibrate past this part, right? That's called the nut. We'll talk about that in a subsequent lesson. But and so the strings don't vibrate past that. This part up here is irrelevant to your playing, right? And what this essentially does is it kind of moves that lower position up higher, right? So if I'm hitting this note, okay, all the way open, all the way up to here, well, that's the lowest note that the string can play. If I put the capo on, say up here on the 3rd fret, it's going to make that higher. Okay, so I'll put the capo on. Now that's the lowest note I can play. Okay, and so I use my same chord forms. We'll talk about this subsequently up here, and I get a different higher sound than if I played them down here. And that's what the capo essentially does for you, is it allows you to kind of change the key of the song and make it higher without having to retune your guitar or learn different chord forms or something. And that can be really handy in different ways. And we're going to have one lesson eventually where we talk about the use of the capo. Some people think it's kind of like cheating or something, and they get all twisted up about it, but you shouldn't. Some of the best guitar players in the world use capos for different reasons, and we'll talk about some of that later on. So don't let the capo snoopiness, snoopy? Don't let the capo snootiness get to you. This can be a very valuable tool, and it can allow you to do things with your guitar that you just can't do without a capo. And so I don't want anybody to derogate the capo. This is called a trigger capo, and it's because it kind of, you know, the bottom here is looks like a little trigger, and you squeeze it like you would the trigger of a gun to open it up and put it on the guitar. It's a very easy and secure one to use. There's lots of different kinds of capos, but I like to recommend these trigger ones because I think they're easy to use, easy on, easy off. They don't get in your way, and they do a great job. And so again, it's probably 10 or 15 bucks to pick up a trigger capo like this. Okay, like I said, optional, but can be useful, and we'll talk about why later on. All right, that's basically it for the equipment. Wanted to finish off this lesson with one other little note, and that is the garage band guitarist uniform. Okay. What am I talking about? Well, if you're going to be seriously in a garage band, you gotta wear the uniform. What is the uniform? The uniform is a black concert t-shirt and jeans. Now, ideally black jeans, but we're okay with blue jeans too. And you'll notice that I am going to try to honor that tradition of garage band guitar playing by wearing concert t-shirts in these videos. Today we have The Who, and I think the last one I had Judas Priest. And so hopefully, you know, if you ever get into a garage band, you show up at the first practice, you know, make sure you're wearing a black concert t-shirt. It's the uniform, dude. See you next time.